So on April 12th, 2026, the United States did something that just sent shockwaves across the entire globe. A full military blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. The world's most critical energy choke point. We're going to dive right into this explosive story and unpack the strategy behind all the chaos.
And there you have it. No room for interpretation, no middle ground. That one sentence right there, it triggered an 8% surge in oil prices overnight and threw global markets into a complete tailspin. This was not just a warning shot. This was a declaration.
Okay, and this is where the story gets really, really interesting. See, before the US even made its move, Iran had already brought traffic in the strait to a near standstill. So you have to ask, why would the US blockade an already blockaded waterway? That's the big mystery we're going to solve today. Here's how we're going to break it all down for you. We'll start with the shocking move itself. Then we'll look at what was at stake, America's three-part strategy, the global fallout, the hidden logic behind it all, and finally, what this whole mess means for the future of our energy security.
This decision to enforce a total blockade was just a massive escalation. It basically turned an economic pressure campaign into direct military action. And the consequences, well, they were felt everywhere.
So to really get the gravity of this whole situation, we need to understand just how vital this narrow little strip of water is. I mean, this isn't just any strait. For all intents and purposes, it's the planet's energy artery. Just look at that number, 20 million barrels of oil every single day. That is the lifeblood for dozens of economies, all flowing through one single, incredibly vulnerable choke point. And this really puts it into perspective. A full 1/3 of all oil that's shipped by sea passes right through here. So shutting it down, that's not a regional issue. It's a direct threat to the entire global energy supply. But here's the thing. The crisis was already underway. As you can see, after Iran's initial actions, traffic had already dropped from over 100 ships a day to just 8. The artery was already clogged. So I ask again, why did the U.S. feel the need to step in? And it wasn't just about oil. Even before the U.S. blockade, a huge Qatari natural gas plant, a massive supplier for the whole world, was taken offline. So the crisis was already deep and complex, which honestly makes the American move even more puzzling.
All right, let's get into the American strategy. This move, which seemed kind of redundant on the surface, was actually a really calculated three-part play, and it was designed to completely reshape the geopolitical map. So the strategy really breaks down into three core ideas. First, strangle Iran's economy. Just turn off the cap completely. Close every single loophole Iran was using to sneak its oil out. Second, sell American oil. The idea was to corner the market. With Middle Eastern oil gone, the world would have to turn to the U.S., creating what they called American energy dominance. And third, apply safe pressure. Do it all with a naval blockade, which gives you maximum economic leverage without the high costs and, well, casualties of a ground war.
But, a plan like that doesn't happen in a vacuum. The ripple effects were immediate, they were severe, and they sent the rest of the world, especially America's own allies, spiraling into crisis. Just take a look at Europe. Natural gas prices, which are a pretty good barometer for the continent's economic health, more than doubled almost instantly. For them, it was a painful flashback to the energy crisis of 2022. And of course, the pain wasn't shared equally. You had industrial powerhouses like Germany and Italy, super reliant on gas, and they got hit the hardest. Nations with more diverse sources like nuclear and renewables, think France and Spain, they did a little better, but really, nobody escaped the shock. This all created the absolute worst-case economic scenario, stagflation. That's that dreaded mix where you have stagnant, almost zero growth happening at the same time as rising prices. It's a trap, because every tool you'd normally use, like changing interest rates, just makes one side of the problem worse. But the pain wasn't just being felt in Europe. Back in the US, the blockade strategy really started to boomerang on American consumers. Inflation jumped pretty significantly in just 1 month, and it was driven by a whopping 38% spike in gasoline prices. The cost of energy dominance was being felt at every single pump. And this slide really reveals the fundamental flaw in that whole sell American oil plan. The U.S. simply cannot produce enough to fill the void. I mean, look at the numbers. The world lost 20 million barrels of daily transit, and the U.S., going at full tilt, can only export about 4.5 million. It's a numbers game the U.S. was just guaranteed to lose. So, if the numbers just don't add up, what was the real thinking here? Well, to understand the logic, you have to realize this wasn't a traditional military strategy at all. It was an economic one. It was the trade war playbook, just applied with warships.
I think a CNN analysis put it perfectly. To really get what happened at Hormuz, you first have to understand the logic of a tariff war.
So what exactly is tariff thinking? Well, at its core, it's the belief that you can hurt your opponent more than you hurt yourself. You accept that your own people are going to pay higher prices, but you see it as a necessary cost to inflict absolutely crippling damage on your rival's economy, forcing them to come to the negotiating table.
But this whole strategy was built on a really flawed idea of American energy independence. It totally ignored two huge facts. First, oil is a global commodity. It's priced globally. So if the world price goes up, so does the price you pay in Texas. Second, the global economy is all connected. A crisis in energy hits everything: fertilizer, plastics, you name it. And those costs always find their way back to the American consumer.
So after all that, what can we take away from this global crisis? This whole event offers some really tough, hard-learned lessons about energy, power, and security in the 21st century.
When you boil it all down, four big lessons really stand out. First, that no country can afford to rely on a single source or a single route for its energy. It's just too risky. Second, the US has clearly shown it's willing to use energy as a primary weapon of foreign policy. Third, Europe's vulnerability, time and time again, is a huge warning sign for any dependent economy. And finally, when the world's energy supply gets disrupted, everybody pays a price. There's just no sitting on the sidelines.
The gamble caused global economic pain, and it risked widespread conflict. But when the dust finally settles on a crisis like this, you really have to stop and ask, is anyone left better off? When energy becomes a weapon, are there any real winners?